Welcome to Animal Behavior. This week we are going over selection and adaptation. I believe this week's lecture is probably the most important lecture of all because you have to understand this lecture to to make sense the behaviors exhibited by the animals. If you take out one behavior, the behavior exhibited by one animal, then sometimes it doesn't make sense at all why this animal does this particular behavior. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. I'm going to give the example of the infanticide by the lions. But you have to look at this behavior using the framework or the viewpoint, that is the evolution. And using this framework of the evolution, then you can make sense of the behavior exhibited by these animals. That's why I think that today's lecture is very important to understand the animal behavior throughout the whole semester. The genus Pantherum have 4 species. They are tigers, and the lions, and the leopard, and jaguars. And they are called big cats because they are big. All other cats, including the cheetah, they are small cats. And the difference these 4 species of big cats does compared to the small cats is they can roar. And all cats are carnivores and efficient predators. The cats are basically solitary, in meaning that they are usually alone, except for the time of mating. So that most of the time you see only one cat at one time, so that they are solitary. But the lions are different. They are group living. I mean, some of you, the lions, they make a group and they live together. So the lions groups is called a pride. So it's a pride of lions. And a pride of lions is a group of related lioness and their cubs. So here's the lioness and their cubs. And the lioness, they are all related, meaning that they are like mothers and sisters and aunts. They are also blood related. And the males are coming from outside of these groups. And usually you have only one male or a coalition of 2 or males in a pride. And if you are the female offspring, then you stay in this group, becoming a group member. But if you are the male offspring, and once you are grown up, then the male cubs are evicted. You are kicked out of this group and becoming a nomad until they find their own pride. The lioness, that's the picture of lioness out on hunting. They do the majority of the hunting for the pride. The lioness, they do all the works to do in a pride. So they hunt, they care for their cubs, they defend their territories. That's all the jobs for the pride. But if you look at the behavior of male lions, they seems to be really lazy. Okay, here's that's the zebra, usually hunted by the female lions. Then these big, the male lions are usually big. They go out and they eat first, even though the lioness hunted down this zebra. They tend to stay on the fringes of the territory and patrolling their territory, doing the markings and roaring. But the one job that is most important for these male lions are they defend their pride against other males. That's the most important job for the male lions. If they fail to defend their color, to defend their pride, what happens is that something horrible, and that's called infanticide. And that's the new males, okay? These are the new incoming males. When they take over this pride first, the first thing they do is that they try to kill all unweaned infants of the pride. That's called infanticide, indicated by this picture. Something horrible. And probably you want to ask, why do they do this? You know that, after all, the lions are endangered species. Their numbers are getting fewer. So that it doesn't it doesn't help anything to the survival of the lion species. And how to make sense of this behavior? To understand this behavior, we need to know some of their physiology. That's all the mammals. We humans are also mammals. They lactate. The females of the mammalian species, they lactate. They feed the offspring. And if you lactate, okay, then it delays reproductions. So this milk production inhibits the reproduction, and which probably is the adaptation that the inhibition provides the optimal birth spacing, so that you don't have the children, several children in a row, so that it'll be good for the survival of the offspring. So when you lactate, you delay the reproduction. In lions, the weaning occurs about 6 to 7 months. They stop milk production about the birth of the lion cubs 6 to 7 months after. But if you interrupt the lactation, if the lactation is interrupted, the fertility, the female lions, they come into heat right away and mate with the males. So let's look at the male lions. You just take over this pride, okay, and you have to defend this pride against all the challenges from the other males. If you fail only once, then you kicked out of this pride, and you have lose probably permanently the chance of reproduction. So but the average tenure of an adult male with the pride of females is about only 2 years. So you want to probably make most out of these 2 years of your tenure in this pride. But if you're a female lion, okay, the lion is not sexually receptive until her progeny is about 2 years old. You look at this, the average tenure is about 2 years old. If you have a little cub here, then the female lion is not going to mate until their cub is about 2 years old, so that the incoming males probably have no chance of mating with this female. But once a lioness has lost her cubs by infanticide, she will come into heat at once and mate with the new males. So that's from the viewpoint of the male lions. By killing the infant, by killing the offspring of this female, they makes the lions sexually receptive right away, so that the female lions can mate with the incoming males, so that the male lion have quick reproductive success. Now, so we have some basic idea about sometimes this in infanticide, not easily understood. But let's look at it from the viewpoint of the evolution. The evolution is the heritable change through time. And evolution is about like a diversity of life and how it has come to be and why it looks and behaves the way it does. And the famous evolutionary biologists, Theodore Dobzhansky called, they said that nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of the evolution. Evolution, I want to call, that's the paradigm or framework, a viewpoint to look at the animal behavior. And although Charles Darwin was not the first person to propose the evolution, he got the mechanism for evolution right, and that is natural selection. What is Charles Darwin is important for is that he got the mechanism for evolution. He proposed for the mechanism for the evolution, which is the natural selection. So natural selection is one of the several for the mechanism for evolutionary change. I mean, there were other mechanisms for the evolutionary change, but the natural selection is probably the most important mechanism for evolution. And how the natural selection occurs? The necessary and sufficient conditions for evolution are 1, variation, 2, inheritance, and 3, selection. So let's look at each condition here. Let's say variation. The members of a species differ in some of their characteristics. So we have some variation. Not everybody is the same in a population. And these changes in the variations are inherited to the next generation, so that the parents are able to pass on their distinctive characteristics to their offspring. So these differences in phenotype, the behavior or morphologies are passed down to the offspring, inheritance. Then selection. If there's a selection and you have this variation, then some individuals have more surviving offspring than others in the population, thanks to their distinctive characteristics. If you have these three conditions, okay, if you have these three conditions are met, then evolutionary change is inevitable. Evolution has to occur if you have these three conditions met. Okay, now we pretty much know about now natural selection, the evolution by natural selection. Let's apply this concept to the strange behavior in infanticide. Let's assume there's some variation in this behavior by the male lions, so that a group of males that commit infanticide after takeover of pride, and other males, let's assume that these males do not commit infanticide. So now we have the variation, these two variations of behaviors. Let's also assume that these behaviors are inherited, okay? So that if your father commit the infanticide, the sons are also likely to commit the infanticide. If your fathers do not commit the infanticide, then sons are not likely to commit the infanticide. That's the inheritance. And let's go to the selection. These two behaviors now, the male lions exhibiting these two different behaviors now competing with each other. Let's assume that the males that is committing the infanticide on average leave 10 cubs per male. That's the assumption. But if you are the males that do not commit infanticide, probably you will have maybe less cubs surviving, because other cubs may die due to the infanticide by these males. So over the long term, they have fewer surviving offsprings than the males that commit the infanticide. So due to this difference in reproductive potential, this one has made 10 cubs per male, and these males have about 6 cubs per male. This difference in reproductive potential, the tendency to commit infanticide will be prevalent eventually. So if many generations later, and all the males that do not commit infanticide, they will perish from the population. The only males that commit infanticide still survive, and that's what we see these days. In the previous slide, we just talked about how many offspring survive per males, okay? And the males, the lion males that have more surviving offspring will become prevalent eventually, so that that's, we say, the fitness, okay? In previous slide, the males that commit infanticide, they leave higher number of the offspring, meaning that they have a higher fitness than those males that do not commit infanticide. So what is the fitness? That's probably the most important concept in the animal behavior. That's the number of offspring produced by an individual. But what is more important, that's not the exact definition of the fitness, but easier to remember. It's just simply to remember that the number of offspring by an individual. But what is important is the relative fitness. In the previous slide, we have two groups of males. One male that commit infanticide, and the other group of males do not commit infanticide, and both produce offspring. Okay, but one group of males that commit infanticide leave more number of offspring than males that do not commit infanticide. So the fitness is different between these two groups. So that's the relative fitness. The relative fitness is important. That's the contribution of an individual makes to the gene pool of the next generation relative to the contribution of the other individuals in the population. Then how do you increase your fitness? Basically, you have to survive and reproduce. Survive and reproduce. And the selection that is applied at this stage is called natural selection, and selection at the reproductive stage may call this sexual selection. So now I want to bring out another important concept. That's the adaptation. Okay, adaptation is a characteristic that makes an organism better able to again survive and reproduce. You know, so if you have some characteristic, okay, it's morphology like our eyes, or the behavior like infanticide, if these characteristics makes the organism better able to survive and reproduce, then that character is an adaptation. So that I may ask you whether the infanticide is an adaptation to male lions. Then certainly that the male lions that commit infanticide, they are able to produce more number of offsprings than the males that do not commit the infanticide. Then the infanticide may be an adaptation to the male lions. That's an adaptation. And we also frequently use this term, the adaptive value. That's the contribution that a trait or a gene makes to fitness. So we may ask you what's the adaptive value of the infanticide in male lions? May be huge. What's the adaptive value of the infanticide to female lions? It may not always be positive because their cubs are killed by the incoming males. So, adaptationist. I'm an adaptationist, and I also want you to become an adaptationist. That's the behavioral biologist who develops and tests hypotheses about the possible adaptive value of a particular trait. So I want you, okay, if you look at some behavior by an animal, and you want to understand why the animal does this behavior, then you should ask, okay, whether that particular the particular trait or behavior has some adaptive value. You should ask whether this trait gives an organism or the animal to better able to survive and reproduce. If it does, then the behavior has an adaptive value, and that's that behavior is an adaptation. That's what you should look at when you study the animal behavior. So adaptation is approach that's testing whether a given trait enables individuals to propagate their special genes more effectively than they would be able to do if they were to behave in some other manner. So again, basically all the same ideas. How do you look at the animal behavior? Just take out some behavior, and sometimes it doesn't really make sense. Then what you should do is that you should study the adaptive value of that behavior. You compare the behavior and then study the adaptive value of the behavior, and then you look at some alternative behavior and also study the adaptive value of the alternative behavior, and compare this adaptive value of these two different behaviors, and the behavior that you are studying have a higher adaptive value than the animals probably exhibit that behavior to have the higher fitness. That way you understand why animals behave some particular behavior. And it should apply to any behavior throughout this course, whether it's the sexual behavior, social behavior, feeding behavior, it doesn't really matter. You should look at what the particular behavior give the fitness value to the organism that perform that behavior. Okay, let's summarize all of this here. I want to call it the evolutionary paradigm. And here, how does evolution occurs? Probably the most important mechanism for the evolution is the natural selection. Here, we have three conditions. The first one is the variation. The second one is the inheritance and selection. If these three conditions are met, then evolution must occur. And that's the evolution by natural selection, okay? And natural selection operates on fitness difference. If you have the behavioral types or the phenotypic types has no fitness difference, then natural selection cannot operate because on average, they give the equal fitness values to these two different behaviors. But if there's a slight difference, okay, it's just a slight difference between these two different behaviors, then natural selection operates on the favor to the that has the higher fitness values. And natural selection explains the adaptation, whether particular behavior is adapted or not, and that if the particular behavior has an adaptation, that's because of that the natural selection has been operated on that particular trait. So that's the evolutionary paradigm. How you understand the behavior, you have to study whether the natural selection processes have been operated on the behavior. Then you have to look at you have to study the fitness difference between the behavior and the alternative behavior. And if you have the behavior has the higher fitness value than the alternative, then that behavior might be adapted so that it contributes to the survival and the reproduction of that organism. And that's the evolutionary paradigm, and you have to remember this evolutionary paradigm throughout the course.